everybody. I'm Ginger Bandeen. I'm the founder and CEO at Mission Driven Data. I'm joined today by Nicole Morris, our Director of Professional Services. And today we are talking about 5 mistakes we still make all the time in SQL, which it's so fun that there was so much excitement about this topic. So we're so happy that all of you are here to talk about mistakes we make. We always like to know where in the world you're joining us from. I see some people have already said in the chat. We've got some other folks here from Oregon, New York, Michigan, Ohio. If you're here, let us know. I'm here in Portland, Oregon, and this is a picture from the Japanese gardens in Portland. Last night was a few nights in the summer, they leave the gardens open late, and we were having this heat wave here in Portland. And so it was really cool because it was much cooler up in the gardens. And so this is a picture from there. But it was nice. We have some folks here from Washington, Kansas. Awesome. Great to see you all. So you are in the right place today if you are a brand new person writing SQL, because it's always cool to know all the mistakes people make so that you can avoid those. If you're someone who already writes SQL all the time, maybe we'll give you some different perspectives or ideas, or maybe you'll just get to feel like you're not so alone and know that other people also make similar mistakes sometimes. So it's cool to have you here too. If you've never written SQL and you're just kind of curious about what this is a great way to get some exposure therapy. So we're happy to have you here too. And maybe you are just in the other folks bucket. Maybe you supervise someone who writes SQL, or someone on your team writes SQL. I think that's cool too, because maybe you'll find out a little bit more about what they might be struggling with or how you could support them. So you're all very welcome here today. All right, so we're going to talk a little bit first about some bigger picture things with SQL coding. We're going to share our top 5 mistakes and how you can avoid them, and some bonus mistakes, because Nicole and I got so excited about our mistakes that we couldn't just think of 5. So you get to hear some more, and we'll have some time for questions as well. So that's what we're doing today. We're so happy you're all here. Again, if you're just joining us, go over to the chat. Let us know where you're from. We love to know that. Okay, so that was a lot of information to get through at the beginning. I just wanted to take a little bit of minute longer to introduce myself, because sometimes people who don't know me don't realize that I started off as a clinician. I often still kind of jokingly say I'm not really a data person, even though now I started a company called Mission Driven Data. But originally I started off in the world as a social worker. I'm still an LCSW. So a lot of times when we have trainings like this, I'm hoping to reach people like me who are out there who maybe don't think of yourself as a coder, or you don't think of yourself as a geek, but you've been trying to learn some of this stuff, and you kind of want to know, like, is what you're running into the same things other people run into? Are you weird? Are you struggling with things other people don't struggle with? So I'm really excited about this opportunity to just talk through some of these things with you all, and just want you to know, like, this is how I learned too. So we're all in the same boat in lots of ways. Nicole, do you want to say a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Hi, everybody. I actually also started off in direct service and as a clinician. People are much more complicated than computers, but it turns out I'm really good at making mistakes. So it's perfect that we're all here today. I always say that the only thing that I perfected is imperfection. Hopefully we'll have some fun today, and you'll at least be able to learn that we do pretty amazing things here at Mission Driven Data. And I really, really love writing SQL. But I am still really, really good at falling into every single one of these traps. So let's get started.
Cool. Thanks, Nicole. So just a brief thing in case you don't know about what Mission Driven Data does. We do data tools. Right now we specialize in the credible EHR. We're very close to announcing upcoming EHRs we support. So if you have a different EHR than credible and you want yours to be in the vote, let us know. We have a community where we host events like this that are very made for everybody to join. If you aren't already a member of our community, we'll put a link in the chat so you can join us. And then we do consulting to help expand your capacity. Okay, so first things first. Nicole and I, when we were talking about this topic, the very first thing we wanted to make sure everybody knows is that mistakes are just a normal part of doing coding. So let me backtrack a little, because I realized when we did the poll, there were some folks here who have never done SQL. SQL just stands, oh my gosh, I'm not sure I can tell you what SQL stands for, Nicole.
Structured Query Language. It's just ways to tell computers what you want it to do.
Yeah, thank you. See, I don't even remember what it stands for, but it's just the code you use to write a query against a database. So you're trying to pull data out of a database and you're telling the database what data you want. So it's just a little coding language. And I just want to normalize that making mistakes is a normal part of the coding process. So when you talk to people who you think of, like when I was just doing clinical work and I would talk to people who did coding, I would assume they did some magic thing that meant that they didn't make mistakes or that they would write code that was perfect every time and they would imagine how it would look and then it would just write itself. Like they were just kind of magicians. And so when I would make mistakes, I would feel like, oh my gosh, I'm just not very good at this. Like this, I make a lot of mistakes. And I think as I've gotten to know more people in like technical fields and just more people in general, like turns out everybody who writes code makes a lot of mistakes. And I used to also always say that I do guess and check coding. Like, I don't know if anyone learned math the way I learned math, but one of the methods they taught us for doing math problems was like, well, just try something and see if it works, and then try something else and see if it works. That's like what people do with code all the time. That's a very common thing to do, not just for people who aren't data people. Like everybody does that. What about the next one, Nicole? What would you say about this one? This next one?
Oh, I would say that there is a limited amount of real estate in one person's head. And so using resources is totally legit. So Google, ChatGPT, all of those things. Small hint for ChatGPT, the more specific you get about what you want, the better she does at being able to give you useful information back. I will also say for ChatGPT, it's helpful to understand a little bit or to do a bunch of guess and checking, like check her work as well, because every once in a while, ChatGPT gives you a very fascinating answer that is also, ChatGPT is practicing mistakes too, y'all.
Oh, yeah. Yes, that's a very good point. Yeah, and we should be clear, we're not using ChatGPT like feeding the whole database into ChatGPT and getting advice about it, but ChatGPT can be useful for things like you would have used to Google. I think of it like that. Like in the
Mhm.
past, if I needed to like remember how to do a date diff, like how to find the difference between two dates or how to figure out if a day is a weekday, I would have like typed that into Google. And now I think a much more efficient way to do that sometimes is to use ChatGPT or any kind of AI large language model out there because a lot of them were trained on all the code that exists out in the world. So odds are they have some context for how to answer a question, but they're not going to be able to tell you that the systems are not going to be able to tell you like I'm using Credible and here's all my data, which I would not recommend doing. Do not feed your data
Mhm.
into a chatbot. Um, so it's not going to be able to tell you what the different tables are or interpret those kinds of things. But it can do things like if you were saying, I've combined two tables and before I ran the query, I had 100 rows and now when I run the query, I have 1,000 rows. Why do I have more rows? It could probably answer that question or give you some clues of what to look for. So I just, yeah. And then you can inform it about information. So you could tell it something like, I have two tables. One table has client information, one table has visit information. I want to answer this question. How could I write it? Could you write me a sample query of how I would answer that question? So can you give some other examples, Nicole, of how you've used that?
I think one that I used the other day was being able to explain to ChatGPT that I had a date field that actually gave date and time. And I wanted to be able just to have a separate, a new field. I wanted to create a new field that just gave me the time, but also would have it in AM, PM. And ChatGPT was able to say, yep, here's all the things to do for that. It's especially helpful. We'll get into this, but my particular brain, its power hour is not at 4 or 5 p.m. in the evening. And so if I am sort of sluggish and can't think as clearly, ChatGPT has helped me on more than one occasion to be able to say, I can't remember how I do that. It has date and time. I need the time, just the time as its own field using AM PM.
Yeah. So that brings us to our next thing, which is it's reasonable to get stuck sometimes. That's another thing that I thought never happened to coders, but if you've ever been around someone who does that for their work, like it's very common for really good people who are really good at that to like stop for a minute and take a walk or stop for a minute and do something else, which is like the hardest part is getting yourself to stop for a minute sometimes because you can kind of be like, why won't this work? Why won't this work? Why won't this work? So getting familiar with this, being comfortable saying to yourself, hang on, let me step away from this for a minute, is like sometimes the best move. I think really good taking a walk. Sometimes I have my brain works better when I'm taking a shower. So like my brain can process information differently. And sometimes just walking away and coming back, you'll see the thing you couldn't see before, right? Have you had that happen, Nicole?
Absolutely. And I'll tell you 9 out of 10 times, I don't even make it around the block on my walk. It's like I make it out the front door and like 10 steps. And I'm like, right, of course. Yes, let me go try that.
Yeah. This is when like the note feature on your phone is helpful. I often have written myself notes. I'll record myself being like, okay, so try doing it this way and then do this. And like I'll write myself notes when I'm on a walk. It's helpful to also keep your phone or something like a pad and paper by the bed, because often it's also when I'm about to fall asleep, I'll think of a solution to a problem. So I always think I will remember it in the morning, but I won't. So it's better for me to have some way to write it down. Okay, so even the best developers can miss a comma. So again, this is this idea that there are people out there who are magically perfect, and that's not true. Like everybody makes mistakes. And especially what I find, if I'm like typing code with someone else and they're watching me, I'm way more likely to make a bunch of mistakes. It's like spelling errors when you're typing something out for an audience. So yeah, okay. And then the other thing that I think makes it really challenging for most of y'all out there who are people who work in community mental health centers and are trying to do coding is that there are extra challenges for that. First of all, often you're the only person in your agency who even knows this language. So there's no one to ask if you get stuck. Like Nicole and I have both been in that boat where, that's why we would be members of like community groups where we could like ask that group. What about the second one, Nicole?
I think that a lot of times in community mental health, you're probably wearing more than one hat. So I doubt that you get the luxury of being able to just sit down and spend like hours just sort of tinkering around with code. And so you might have other parts and meeting that get interrupts, all of those things. So it's just hard to find time that you can focus and do the deep work that SQL coding requires.
Yeah. Or to put together enough time that because a lot of this stuff, if you do it enough, you start to learn it. But if you're constantly like just barely getting started, then you have to start over again, then it's really
Yep.
hard. So yeah.
Yeah, that reorientation piece to be like, wait, what was I working on and how did I do that? And I haven't looked at this for 5 days. I always think it is a language. So I tried in junior high to learn another language. I went to class. I did my homework. I swear I did. But it was different when I went and you are like immersed in it and you go and live in a area where everybody is speaking not your language of origin. You pick up that language so much faster because you're just practicing it all the time every day.
Yeah. I think it's also easy to feel like you'd be better at this if you went to college for it, right? Like we're used to that being the way that you develop an expertise. And you probably didn't go to college for this. I mean, some people on the call probably did. That would have been a good poll question. But often people didn't. And it's easy to feel like, oh my gosh, if I like to sort of feel a little bit of like imposter syndrome about it, right? Like this would be easier if I was just like better at this kind of thing. So just again, we're going to get into our 5 mistakes. These are just some general principles we wanted to mention because I think it's important to be kind to yourself and to recognize that there's some things you might need to change to just set yourself up for success, right? So this one's my biggest thing is figuring out the time of day when your brain has the easiest time doing code tasks and then ask for support to clear your schedule at that time. So for me, I'm pretty good morning-ish, like around 9 to 10, and I'm pretty good late. I'm a night owl. So like I could come back after dinner and be really good at writing code. If you want me to write really complicated code around 3 p.m., you should have me take a nap. And then I might be able, I'm like a kindergartner. You should give me a nap time and then I might be able to. So that's my timing. How about you, Nicole? What's your peak time for writing code?
Yeah, I'm almost the exact opposite of you, except for that 4 to 5 o'clock hour, mostly because I think I'm starting to get hungry. So if I have a snack, I too am a kindergartner. While you're doing nap time, I need snack time.
There you go. Nice. But you're more of an early bird than a night owl, right, Nicole? You like late.
Yeah, I don't get that second wind at, like late in the evening, mostly because my sincere hope is that I am unconscious and sleeping at that time. So yeah, I don't have that. I need to make the most of that quiet, dawn time. Yeah.
Yeah. Isn't it cool that people are all different? So so that's our suggestion. Figure out what that is for you. And what honestly, like one way to do that is just try it out. Try writing some code at different times of day and see what time of day you notice you can kind of get into flow easier. It's an excellent thing to try. Another suggestion that we have is to come to co-working because we have co-working twice a month. Very often no one comes to co-working, y'all. So like you could show up and get an hour of our time like free and uninterrupted. So, and even if you just come because you have stuff you want to work on, but you're not sure you need our help, but you come because it's an hour of uninterrupted time, like come and show up. I think it's worth it. Okay, another tip. Nicole, do you want to talk about this starting a file one?
Yeah, so there's lots of places where you can store code. I know people who go ahead and store code using like just a text file, and I know other places, including us here at Mission Driven Data, that we like to have versions of like I tried this and look that it didn't work, and here was the second version and the third version, and so we really use GitHub for that. But somewhere where you can say, here's the kinds of bits of code that I use a lot. So that really complicated thing that I did a month ago that I now can't remember how I solved for that problem, I'd love to go look at that and see what I did and then steal and repurpose it. That kind of goes into that same thing with Google and ChatGPT. Repurposing or using other folks' code that they've solved for, also a good resource.
Yes. Um, okay, and then the other thing is we just want you to follow some of the tips we're going to go through in our mistakes. Now we're getting into our mistakes. Is everyone so excited? Okay. And some of these are real life examples that I, Ginger, have done.
Oh, every single one of them. Yes, we have
All
both
right.
done.
So hopefully this is possible to see. Is it readable to you, Nicole? I know it's a little small.
I can see it.
Okay, we're going to send these out on the slides too, so don't panic. So the basic principle here is giving names to things in your SQL code that later you're going to kick yourself for, right? Which I have 100% done. So this is an example of a query that is just looking for client visits in that are a certain type of visit and a certain program, right? So that, well, what it's doing first is oh, hi, Michael. From Michael said, just logged into GitHub for the first time ever. Okay, I'm just gonna make this
Welcome.
bigger so I can see it. So this is a really simple query. It is using something called a CTE, which is like a little mini table that you build and then connect to another table. So when you build little mini tables in SQL, you give them names. And you can see on the example on the left-hand side, I named my table XYZ. And then down below, I named one of my tables in the query, I renamed client visit CV. And then for fun, I also named my next little mini table CV. So by the end, my brain is not going to remember what does CV mean at the very end where I say select star from CV. Like that is not a great way. That is not very kind to future Ginger who might need to come back and do something with this code. So on the other side of the screen, you can see an example of better naming conventions, which would be maybe call the first thing outpatient therapy. So this is my little outpatient therapy little table. And then maybe my next little table is relevant answers to those questions in the individual therapy form. So then by the time I get to the very bottom, I can say select star from relevant answers and I know what the heck I'm talking about. So if you do write code against the same tables all the time, you'll probably get in the habit of, like for me, I do always rename client visit CV and I do always rename save visit answer SVA. So I shouldn't use CV or SVA anywhere where that's not what that means, or I'm going to really be sad because it's going to be confusing. Can you think of other examples like this, Nicole?
I think the other thing I would build on that as well is sometimes it's nice to be able to do some sort of naming convention to be able to know that the table that you created, you gave a name, is something that you gave rather than the original source table from your database. We use a database that pulls information from an electronic health record called Credible. I would say that's our most popular database that we use. And so they have lots and lots of tables, but believe it or not, there are table names that aren't that much different than like outpatient therapy or relevant answers. They're human readable and make sense. But being able to know that that's something that comes, so something later we'll talk about sort of troubleshooting and testing. Later on in your code, you have some sort of issue, you can know whether you need to go check something in a source table that's in your database versus something that you transformed or modified through a CT or creating your own table.
Yeah, thank you. So like it would also be a mistake, not a mistake, but like possibly a mistake if I renamed one of my tables and called it client visit, because now I've got two tables called client visit. One of the things we often do is we append the name of a table with like MDD for our team if we're making a table. So we'll remember like, oh, that's one of our tables. We called it MDD. So it's a good idea to think about that. And then if you're brand new to SQL, see, this is why it's great you're here, because you could start a practice that you always follow. You could even do something ridiculous, like something that you'll always know is yours. So I think that's a really good idea. Okay, Ben has a question in the chat. Could you explain the difference between a CT and a temporary table in SQL? So Ben, while we were talking just now, I Googled the answer to that question because I don't know the answer to that question. There are various ways to store temporary data when you're writing a query. So I might need to get back to you because I could not tell you, like, I don't know that I use temp tables much. I would normally do CTEs, which is when you do the little with. So I need to think about what would be a good example of when I would use a temp table. Sometimes it makes a difference in how fast a query will run. And then there are sometimes some EHRs that won't let you do certain things. So sometimes people use like a temp table. Like if you use Credible, I think when you write a subquery, when you write one of these little things, you can't do a CTE, but you can use a temp table. So Credible doesn't like temp tables. True.
Yes.
Yes. Both things are tricky if you're writing SQL directly in an EHR that doesn't give you access to your actual database. Then you can get away with like subqueries, which is a different way of pulling part of a query. Maybe this is a whole topic we should do a whole webinar. Oh, that's a good answer. Naomi says a CT can only be used once in a query, but can be very fast for certain scenarios. A temp table can be modified and called on multiple times in a query, like a regular table. Cool. I was going to say the other thing we do sometimes is create an actual table, which I'm assuming there's something different between a temp table and an actual table. I think temp tables, people usually drop them at the end of the query. But sometimes we just create like an actual table that then we reference later on in this query, and then we can also reference it in other queries too. But you can't do that if you're working directly out of the database that you're accessing and not like pulling the data out to do something.
Look at
Oh, look,
Andrew. Yes.
temp tables are automatically dropped when SQL stops running. We love you all. This is the point. This makes me so happy. Keep asking us hard questions. Awesome. Okay, confusing naming, but the point being that all the things, also that it's okay to Google things. So, and to have a team, we love it. Okay, mistake number 2, messy formatting. Okay, so I feel like we've all done this where you're like typing something out and you're just like, oh, I'm just doing this really fast. I just want to like get this query out. So on the left-hand side, you can see that this is like a very confusing query now because I've got like 3 selects. It's hard to tell where the parentheses go. It's like hard to read this query and figure out what the heck it's doing. If you've ever exported a query from a system, sometimes it comes out in in very annoying formatting like this that honestly, I often will start by fixing the formatting because I find it illegible. What about you, Nicole?
Yeah. Since people mentioned Credible, not only does Credible not like temp tables, but if you've ever used the export tool, regardless of what you put in for your SQL there, the next time that you open it up, everything is left aligned. So it's hard to know where things start or stopped or what is connected or nested. Unlike your sort of query on the right, which sort of very clearly says which things go where and what's connected.
Yeah. Yeah, so this is just an example of how I like to format queries. I think some indenting is nice. Some I don't do it. There are people who would criticize the way I just formatted it too. So I think this is an area where it goes back to you don't have to be perfect at this stuff to be doing a good job, right? Like some people would say my query on the right is still not perfect because I didn't capitalize. A lot of times people will capitalize like all caps, like select and from and where. and that sort of thing. And I don't tend to do that. I also have a friend who, when they code, they they're so particular about their formatting that instead of hitting tab on their keyboard, they purposely go 4 spaces to the right so that they'll always know if it's their code or someone else's code, because their code is always 4 spaces, not a tab. So you can certainly take this all the way on the extremes of both ends. But I think thinking about where formatting can make life easier for you. So the example here that I think is most helpful to me in my brain is down at the very bottom of the query on the right, where there's a little where the visit needs to be inside another table. That little bit being separated out like that helps my brain know, oh, that's just a little mini reference up to the table above. So that's an example of how uh,
People are
oh,
being nice and trying to say it's not so bad.
oh yeah.
I,
Thank you,
I do
Michael.
want to
Yes.
sort of mention, since we do have some people who are brand new to SQL, that this formatting doesn't change function. It's really intended. There's nothing that will stop you from having differences in formatting. And I'm not aware of any hard rules around like, what you're supposed to do for formatting. There certainly are norms for formatting. Really, I think that in the practical, pragmatic world, pick formatting that helps you and how your brain works. So when you're looking at your query later, you can easily or more easily be able to find out what you were intending to do.
Yeah. Thanks for saying that, Nicole. The truth is, if I ran either one of these queries, it would give you the exact same information on the right and the left. It's just saving myself time in the future when I have to explain this to someone or use it again or change it. So I think like this itself isn't the mistake. The mistake would be made because I would be confused and mess something up. So, um, yeah. There was something else. Oh yeah. Oh, that was the other thing. There are some SQL. So we're talking most about writing SQL and MS SQL, but I forgot that I think Oracle SQL formatting does matter, which is very weird. There are some types of SQL where formatting matters, but the SQL we typically write, and if you use credible and write queries, it doesn't matter. Oh, okay. Wait, is there an exception? I'm sure I'm going to think of an exception. You do need spaces in places, like you need like a space between two words, or it won't know. Or if you put spaces in words, it will think those are two words. But yeah, I'm sure there are exceptions. But anyway, okay. Mistake number 3, missing comments. This is again not a mistake in terms of your query won't work. It's a mistake in terms of your life will be hard, which is, and this is an extreme amount of comments, but comments are so in everything in this query that you see that's in green is a comment, meaning that the computer will ignore it. It's just for us to communicate to our future selves and to each other what a query. Nice to see you too, John. Sorry. So anyway, comments can be done 2 ways. You can comment something out as a whole paragraph. So see how this one at the top, you just use these what do you call it? A slash and a star, and then everything between us 2 slashes and stars will be ignored by the computer. Or you can just put 2 dashes in front of something, and the 2 dash comments can go at the end of a line, even if it's going to continue on in the query. So I'm just giving you some examples of the kinds of comments that might be helpful. Like sometimes it's nice to leave yourself a note at the top of a query about what the heck that query does. Again, some types of comments at the top of notes don't work in the credible query editor, so you might have to put those comments at the end. Um, oops, I hit the scroll bar. Sorry. Okay, and then, but the other types of comments, sometimes I'll put a comment in that explains what I'm doing and that I'm doing it intentionally. Like if I was doing this query, I'm only pulling from client visit in Credible Land. There's another table that has incomplete visits, so I would be reminding myself like, hey, I'm only pulling completed visits. I might put a reminder to myself that program 2 is outpatient because that might help me remember why I did program 2. And I might even do something like this, like, hey, Megan said to only use program 2, and then my initials so that I remember, like, that was Megan who said that. So these are all examples of comments that might save you time later. What would you add, Nicole?
I would just say that it is a personal preference. I know that the Ginger, I probably put too many comments in my code, and you always talk about how like, oh, I should probably use comments more. So it's really intended for your personal preference. I do really like putting, especially when I'm starting a new query, putting what it is that I need to think about at the very top. And sometimes I will go ahead and even include some like testing pieces where I'm just like, well, what's in that table? Do I know what field I need in that table? And have those at the ready to help me out later with testing.
Cool. Thanks. Yeah, I'm not very good about commenting things. And again, this won't make things not work. It's just saving yourself time in the future. And I will say, like, when you write a really long, complicated query, it's more likely you're going to make a mistake later if you don't remember what you did. So, okay. Testing plan. Testing too late or not at all. So a few things that help with testing, is to pull your little mini queries as you go, and you can use order by in those tests that you do to see, like, am I getting all the current? My favorite is if someone started using a form and you want to know if they're still using that form, you can order things by like the date of service to find out, like, oh, I found all this data, but it's from like 2019, or I don't see any records in here except, people, like if you were trying to look at people by a certain age range, you could order that by the age to see if you're really getting the right age range that you meant to get. And then sometimes it helps to go ahead and put your data, like a sample set of data. If you're trying to put this into like a visual tool, sometimes it helps to do that as part of your testing. What else would you say? There's another slide too about testing, Nicole, but is there anything else you would add to this part?
Just that one of the key parts about testing is sometimes it's not as exciting as it is to be like, oh, I want to get to the next thing. But it does save a lot of energy when you realize like, oh, that was close, but it wasn't quite what I needed. And if you catch that early, then you haven't built the last thing based on something that didn't work previously. So it is really worth it. And then the other thing, when Ginger and I were going ahead and brainstorming, she was like, "What mistakes are you making?" And I said, "Well, I have streaks, and my latest streak is about the fact that I forget to comment out or take out the parts that I put in just for testing. So that order by seems to be the one that I'm finding the most. I'm just in a rut. I seem to do it all the time of keeping that in my CTEs when I'm testing to see what will come back. And because we use SSMS SQL, it yells at me every time and it's like, you can't have that order by in there, Nicole, get that out of there. So just a comment to, if you, as you're testing, if you are limiting or filtering things to look at one visit or one client or those types of things, don't forget to comment and take those out.
Yeah, that is one trick with testing is you can have like where you're just looking at a subset of your data. So if like it's a long query, you can just look at a little bit of data to look and see if it's right. And then it's important to comment it out. Yeah. Yeah, I was going to say there's nothing worse than getting to the end of a big long query that you've been working on for a while and then it pulls like 0 results and then you're like, cool, where did I lose all my results? And then you get to
Oh,
go back
yes.
and figure it out.
But it's happened and
It all
it's
happens.
probably
Yeah.
going to happen again for me.
Yep. 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 And you're like, well, I feel like there are people in this database that are 35. So where did they go? Okay, and then there's a little trick with this is again like a formatting thing, right? Like if you are using CTEs, there is a little trick with testing where if you make it so the little, I don't know, it's a little hard to see, but this is a little bit of a deep dive, but you see where I have the comma CV as and then the parenthesis, and I just commented those 2 lines out. That you can't run by itself 2 CTEs. How do I want to say this? To test a query where you're using CTEs, you have to get to the final step where you select from those CTEs. Maybe that's the difference with temp tables, but that's a side note. So sometimes if you want to test it, you kind of turn the second or the third or the fourth or the fifth CTE into like a fakey query of its own. And so an easy way to trick SQL into saying this is its own query is to just comment out the first two lines if you format it this way. If you're doing a lot of this and you have questions about this one, come to co-working because I'm happy to explain it in more detail. It's a little bit of a deep dive. Okay, mistake number 5 is nulls. Oh my gosh, this is the one I have made very recently, which is you have to remember if you're looking at data that has some things from one thing and some things from another thing, and you're going to ask it to look for just certain things, you have to remember whether or not you meant to exclude the things that were missing the data. So a great example, which I've totally done, is trying to look at maybe episodes that people who still have an open episode or whose episode they've been open at some time in the last year. So in my head, I might think like, cool, well, as long as their discharge date happened after January 1st, then they've been open at some point this year, right? the problem, so I'm sure you guys, because I've mentioned nulls, might be already thinking like, but wait, what about people who don't have a discharge date? But it's really easy to forget that you also want the people who don't have a discharge date. So that happens to me all the time. And basically, you just need to add the little line like, or it's null. And this is another one where, depending on what kind of SQL you write, it matters for whatever reason. I always try to put the null first in the line. I don't believe that is real, but in my head, I think it's Oracle SQL that gets mad at you if you have to say the null part first. So I've just gotten in the habit that I always say, if I'm saying this has to be this value or null, I always say it's null or this value. I don't, that's just an old weird thing. Someone else might know if that was Oracle SQL. I think it was, like when I used to write queries against care logic. So
I
anyway,
always thought it was just as a practice to like always remember the null first. The other part where null comes into place that isn't mentioned in this example is your case whens.
mhm.
So that is also a place to always make sure that you think about when it's null first. Then what if it existed in this condition or with these particular qualifiers?
Oh, Nicole, I'm so glad you brought that up. That's such a great example. So, like, for example, if you, yeah, like how you want to handle the ones that are missing something. I'm trying to think of a good example of that. Like if you wanted to know how many people have had individual therapy and you wanted like the 1 to 5 to be one group of people, 1 to 5 individual therapies, 5 to 10 individual therapies, like what if they've had zero and it won't really be zero, right? It might be null if there's null individual therapies. Oh, I love that. It's a great example. Another one with nulls is just thinking about that when you're doing your joins. So someone mentioned challenges with joins. Um, Anytime you do an inner join, it's like eliminating the null values. So in this example, like this first part would say only clients who have had an episode. It's not going to keep any records in your query that don't have an episode or that don't have a client, which would be weirder. But hopefully you don't have a lot of episodes without clients, but I mean, anything's possible. So, if you make an inner join, it goes both directions, right? So it's saying both of these things need to exist. If you want your data to include clients, even if they don't have an episode, that's when you have to think about using left joins. And it's very, very uncommon to use right joins because I don't know why. I mean, I would say this is in the world. It's very unlikely to use a right join. So you're almost always going to use a left join. And a left join is the same as a left outer join. You can write the whole thing out, but the shorthand is left join. And so yeah, so this would mean show me all the clients, regardless of whether or not they have an episode, but do show me the episode ID if they have one. So what you would get here would be a big list of client IDs, and half of them or some number of them wouldn't have anything for episode ID. It would be null, and then some would have an episode ID.
So just to mention, depending on where you write your SQL, you might encounter times where it just says join. It doesn't say inner join. It's meaning inner join. If you don't specify left, right, outer, etc., then it defaults to thinking you mean inner join.
Thank you. I was going to say that, but I couldn't remember for sure if that was the way it worked. But I think sometimes when you export things from different systems, you get something that just says join. And then you're
Yep.
like, wait, is that a left join? But it's by default, the word join will be like an inner join. Cool.
Yep.
Awesome. Okay. Those were our 5 top mistakes, but we have bonus mistakes. So a bonus mistake is identifiers. So if you're thinking about things you need to count, so this is more, well, this could happen in a query that you're running just to create an aggregate as well. But especially if you're going to export that data and then want to put it into like a visual tool, and in your visual tool, you want to like uniquely count all your clients, or uniquely count all your services, or uniquely count all your episodes, then you're going to need something to count. And so, thinking about what the unique thing is you want to count can sometimes be really important as you're planning out your query. So, things like clients and services often have a unique ID already, but sometimes people want like um, unique days of service, like the number of different days people have come in for services. And if that's the case, then you would want to combine your 2 columns for client ID and service date together and create kind of like a pseudo identifier. So we do that all the time to count different things in Power BI. So it's important when you do that to test your data because it's really easy to accidentally have the two things like literally adding together so that you're getting a number like 2048,502 when it's because it's misinterpreting what you're trying to do. So there's some tricks to getting those to marry up into a unique identifier, but that's a really good one. How about with duplicate rows, Nicole? Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, sure. So I think that being able, when you're adding sort of those values for like programs or providers, being able to find where you might have we've talked about episode. So episodes sort of indicate that there would be a program. You could go ahead and say a client has more than one episode. Hopefully they're for two different programs unless if they're open. However, there can be times in the past, right? Like if I was a client, maybe I came in 2020 and then I left for a little while, then I came back again in 2023. So now I have two different rows for each time that I came in. So if you were to, is that sort of what you're meaning, Ginger? Is you could count me. I'm only one person. So if you counted the client ID, it would just show up as one person. If you want to see every time that I came in, then you want to be able to count each of those specific rows.
I think also I've seen where people have like a query that's doing just fine that has a row for every client, and then they want to bring in like all their episodes. But when you bring in all your episodes, now you've got a row for every episode. So
Yep.
sometimes you have to think about, and we're going to talk about that in bonus mistake number 2, which is about granularity. But just the idea that if you have duplicate rows, it's not necessarily a bad thing. Like you might be okay in your main report. You just need to think about having an identifier you can count that's separate if you want still a unique count of things.
I
Um,
like your chart there actually, because it really clearly shows that if you just look at the client IDs, there's only two clients, but there are three services there. And if you were to look at how many there are for services per client, you could see that client 22 has two different service IDs.
yeah, yeah,
It's a
yeah.
nice example. Well done.
Oh, actually, Katie made that, who's not on video, but she's here.
Well
We'll
done,
tell her
Katie.
well done. Make sure you're counting when you want to count. So again, look at a subset of your data and see if the counting looks right. Same if you're doing sums or other types of aggregates. So, okay. Bonus.
Along those same
Oh,
lines, Ginger,
yeah.
if people do the type of SQL where when you're counting things, we didn't mention it specifically and it's more of a deep dive, but I want to acknowledge the difference between a count versus a distinct count. So if you do find that you're in a situation where you have duplicate rows. So if we were just to look at this example of client ID, there are two rows for client 22. If we were to count the rows, they'd have two rows. If we did a distinct count of client ID, we would have one client that's 22 and one client that's 35.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's the
So
difference.
yeah, we could do a deep dive into that too. We're going to ask questions at the end about what deep dive you guys want us to do next. So put a pin in that if that's one of the ones you're like, I want more about that. Okay, granularity is our other bonus mistake. What level of data do you need? So this is one where it's really nice to think about it ahead of time when you're starting to think about a query because and that just means what does a row of data mean? Is it going to mean a client? Is it going to mean every service? Is it going to mean every episode? If you're going to be visualizing it in Power BI, it might make sense to leave the data more granular and then do the aggregating in there because then you can have a drill through to the details. Um, and then it is possible to have both the details and a summary in the same report, but if you try to do both in one query, it's not going to work. A query has one level of granularity. The end result of a query has one level of granularity. So you can't be like total clients and client IDs in one query and get something that's going to make any sense to you. You could have a row for every client ID and a total of all the client IDs as another column that's going to be the same for every row. But that doesn't totally make a lot of sense. So it's really good to think about what you're trying to do here. Is there anything else you would say about that, Nicole?
I would just say that if you are new, if you have written a lot of SQL, but you are new to writing SQL, thinking about writing it in such a way that it will work for a visualization, co-working or talking to colleagues who have done that before is going to be a really great start because it is a little bit of a paradigm shift of thinking as opposed to being able to write SQL where you just want to be able to have results to go and submit to a director or off to the state or any other governing authority.
Yeah, so if you're used to like reporting number of clients served, you've probably done that in SQL by just counting your clients served. But if you're going to pull that into like a visualization tool for someone else to use, you might want to count, you might want to bring all the client IDs in and then have a way they can change that to see how many clients were served in different time frames. All right. So we have some last questions for you all. We want to know some things. I'm going to find the polls. Hold on. so yeah. So what we would love to know from you guys today, and I know we covered a lot of things. We would love to know which of these things you would like a deeper dive on. So naming conventions and code formatting, dealing with missing data, join logic and granularity, testing strategies, unique identifiers, counting things correctly. We would also love to know if there's something we just literally barely mentioned. So I've already got in the back of my mind, like this temp table thing might be something we could talk more about. But if you want to vote for that and it's not in the list, please feel free to type it in the chat. We'll look there too. Um, yeah, and then this was just another idea we had. Would it be fun to do a live demo where we focus on fixing SQL errors? Like, would that be fun? Oops, sorry, I was scroll without meaning to. Would that be fun? So let us know what you think about that. Because we'd be curious if that would be of interest to the group. We're always trying to think of things that could be of value to everybody. I hope you guys noticed a lot of the tips we talked about today you could use in any system. It's really agnostic. Don't have to be working with us or anything like that. So cool. Thanks everybody for filling out the poll. It's so helpful to get your feedback. So far, if you haven't voted yet, the one getting the one out in the lead is join logic and granularity. So if you have a different vote, make sure you get your vote in. But yeah, uh, anything you want to say about that, Nicole?
Yeah, I would just say that this is in no way a even comprehensive or close to comprehensive list of mistakes that I am capable of, or any of the people that I have ever worked with or known are capable of. So we're not above crowdsourcing ideas for other topics for maybe future sort of, you know, the next 5 most common mistakes that people make. So feel free to let us know if something isn't in there and you think that it is common and would be helpful,
Yeah.
or if you have a solution for it, even better. Tell us in
Yeah,
the
and
chat.
if you're feeling shy about the chat, you can also email us too if that feels scary. So, okay, cool. Thanks everybody for filling out the poll. That is awesome. Super helpful to know what people are thinking about. Okay, so upcoming events. We are doing Power BI for really, really, really beginners. Like, what the heck even is Power BI? So, if you've been using Power BI for a while, it will be. We're warning you, it's going to be real basic because we want to help the folks who are kind of like, I don't even know what it is. How do I open it? What is happening here? What can I break? What should I be careful of? All those things. So it's going to be really focused on that population, but you're also welcome to come because maybe it'll give you some tips on how you could talk to your users about Power BI if you have some new ones. So you're very welcome. Just want to warn you, it's going to be for you for the newbies.
And just to clarify, I think that because this audience is probably people who are really interested in report writing, it's more about navigating and how to use a Power BI report that has already been built rather than like beginning for learning how to use or build, like how to build a Power BI report itself. We do have things in the community videos on that if that's something that you want. And
Yeah.
we may do another one someday.
Yeah, I'll point those out here in a second. So yes, okay. If you're interested in presenting in one of we try to have guest speakers about once a month. It's been a couple months. We had some other stuff going on, but we have one coming up soon. But if you're interested, let us know. Okay, this is a reminder about our community. So if you haven't already joined, the link is in the chat. In our community, if you go to the left-hand panel and click on SQL development, there are several videos that we recorded about SQL that are more like intro videos. So if today you were just like, oh my gosh, this is overwhelming, those I've gotten good feedback from those. Like people find those really helpful. Same with Power BI. There's Power BI report users and Power BI report builders. So all of these resources on the left-hand side, except for Credible Admin and Support Essentials, that's like a little class that there is a charge for. But all these other ones are free. You get to go use them, watch the videos, get as much as you can out of them, and then come to co-working, which you can also find under events in the community. We have one coming up. We try to do about 2 a month. So yeah. Okay. And then just a reminder, we are so our company and we help agencies. And our big thing we're doing right now is Janet for CCBHCs. If you're a CCBHC and you want to know more about that, let us know. But our mission is to get all y'all excited about data and how you can use it more effectively so that we can spark your creativity and outsource better ways of using data. So we're so excited you guys were all here today for this. Nicole, thank you for sharing. Yes, and we should have had a disclaimer that said this is in no way a comprehensive list of all the mistakes that we have made. Um, yeah, so yeah. But we appreciate you guys all being here. We'll stick around for a minute or two if you guys have questions or comments. Katie's putting some more links in the chat. But yeah, it's great to see you all. We hope we'll see you at an upcoming co-working. It's a lot of fun. You don't have to be someone who works with us in any other way. It's often fun to just meet other people who do this kind of work so you don't have to feel so alone. That's how I learned most of what I know about code was from other people. So join us and get to know some other people. The other thing that's happened sometimes is people from different agencies show up to co-working and then you meet those people, which is cool. But yeah, thanks to everybody who's saying thank you in the chat. And oh, if you're in Oregon or Washington, we might get to see you in person here pretty soon. We are going to be up in Tumwater for a 1-day event with all the incredible users up there. So that's pretty exciting too. And if you live in a state that you would like us to come and do an event in, let us know because that's like our new thing and we have a lot of fun doing those. So all right, you guys, we're going to let you go. Thanks everybody for being here. It was wonderful. You guys are great. Go out there and make some more mistakes. We can't wait to hear all about them. All right, we'll talk to y'all soon. Bye.